Hello everyone, and welcome to This Nintendo Life, episode 208. My name is NBZ, and I'm lucky to be joined by someone else on this show, given the way that last couple of days have gone for one Bally over here. But I am joined by Bally, who is recovering, let's say, from some bad stuff going on. How are you feeling, Bally?
I'm feeling better. Stomach issues. Shall we just call it bowel movements?
That's the, bowel movements.
That's the thing. But
let's just say that what you told me, I would not commit to a recording and put out on a podcast feed. Basically, is the situation you were in. So
it was bad, but I am through definitely the worst, and I'm feeling much better. So
that's good to hear.
I'm good to go.
Fantastic, all good times. We're here and we're feeling ready to just unload our bowels of video games because there are so many of them.
So many games.
We'll be talking about that stuff. But at the top of the show, I wanted to shout out that we are doing another Backlog Club. If you didn't notice, there was a little mini pod that went up in the feed last week that was kind of saying, hey, we don't have long before the end of the year and we're going to have Game of the Year stuff coming soon, and we kind of only have one more show coming up in order to talk about this. And we kind of want to give people a heads up on the show before that to say what we're playing, which meant we had to do the vote early. So we did do a vote, thanks to our patrons who voted in our mini Backlog Club poll. And the choices were, this is for a kind of a Genesis poll, basically. So games on the Switch Online from the Genesis selection. And our choices were Shinobi 3, Strider, and Rise Star. All very short games. They're all a couple of hours long, so we wanted to make something that was easy, short, easy to get through, so that everyone could participate, and only given a couple of weeks should be able to play through. And the winner, Bally, by a slim margin, was Rise Star, which our patrons had selected. And I find the funny thing about this is that Shinobi 3 got 0 votes, and that's the game. I was looking at a Nintendo Life article of the highest rated. They were basically ranking all the games on the Genesis online service, and Shinobi 3 was the one that was ranked the highest, and no one voted for it. So, but Rise Star.
What are you saying about our listeners, NBC?
No, they have no taste whatsoever. I'm just going to say that Rise Star, I think, probably fits the most, given it's a mascot platformer that Sega created from that era. I'm really interested in checking it out. So we're going to be playing Rise Star. It, as I mentioned, is on the Switch Online service. You can also probably find it on the Genesis collection that Sega have done in the past. It's it's available out there. You can play it. But yeah, we've got 2 weeks, and it's only a couple of hours long. We're going to do kind of probably a bit of a truncated Backlog Club on it, seeing as probably not a huge amount to talk about with it, but I would like to kind of talk about its history and all that stuff. And check it out, play along, and obviously give us some feedback on it in our Discord, where you can go to the Backlog Club thread and post in there. And also, obviously, you can email the show and let us know your thoughts on Rise Star. But awesome. We will get to that next time on the podcast. Bally, what are we talking about this time on the podcast?
Well, first segment, we're going to be talking about an absolute ton of games. I was about to say a butt ton of games, but we've already made that joke. And then 2-segment show. For the second segment, we're going to be going through some of your listener emails. So many games that we want to talk about that we thought probably best to do a 2-segment show.
Yeah, so let's kick it off then, Bally. Let's get into it. We obviously had the release, as I mentioned, of the Switch Online new expansion pack that has N64 games, Genesis games, this Animal Crossing update as a part of it, and I have touched all of them in various different ways, but I thought we'd kick things off by talking about the N64 games, seeing as we did a stream together where we played a bunch of N64 games multiplayer online, and it was a good time. I enjoyed doing this. It was fun to go back to these games. I think probably you have a lot more nostalgia for them than I do because you owned an N64 and played a lot more of them than I did. 2 in particular with Mario Tennis and Mario Kart 64. How are you feeling about this service so far? And obviously a lot of people have criticisms, which I totally think is warranted. But I guess from my perspective, Nintendo Switch's online when it comes to this stuff has always worked really well. And I remember us playing Wild Guns. That was super seamless. Playing against each other with their service in this way and the way in which you connect to each other, it's actually always been quite easy and pretty good overall.
Yeah, I actually think, and I know the price disparity is kind of better for us UK folks for the first time ever. So I paid for the upgrade and it pays the difference. So I had the standard service and I paid for the expansion pack, they call it, isn't it? And, I think I paid the difference, which worked out at like £22, I want to say. So I already...
Depends when you renewed,
Right,
basically.
right.
Mine was coming up in February, so I had to do quite a bit more. But
Right.
they take off an amount based on... It's a pro rata rate, basically.
So I think for the value, even if I never touch that thing again, I've had a really fun stream, playing all those online games with you and really scratched that nostalgia. I've already had a blast, and I think from a value proposition, it's pretty good. As a service as it is, could the roster be bigger? Obviously. But
we know Nintendo are going to be adding new games.
And they're going to be adding. Obviously, we're probably not going to get many of the kind of third-party deep cuts that are just so expensive to try and get back out there.
Yeah, mainly licensed stuff. Although what I will say is that given Banjo-Kazooie has been announced, Rare, the door is open for stuff like Conker to come through, and Jet Force Gemini and those types of games. Probably not GoldenEye. Perfect Dark, probably, actually. Perfect Dark is likely. Yeah. But yeah, there's definitely some in there that are a little tricky.
Diddy Kong Racing's one I'd love to see that I never got to.
Definitely.
So I think that it's actually a pretty good service. I don't love the idea that I'd rather it was just one price for everything, and if they put up that price for everything, maybe the segmented thing I don't think is perfect, but I mean, I'm happy to pay the higher tier, and I've already had great value. I think we had a blast. I knew that Mario Kart 64 doesn't quite hold up as well as you might think it does, but going into it with that knowledge, I had an absolute blast playing it, knowing that it's got some really fun tracks, and yes, it's hard, but we had a great time. I thought it was just awesome.
Yeah, it's when I picked it up for the first time, I was like, oh, wow, Mario Kart felt different back in the day. Definitely not this kind of smooth experience that we have now. And I think part of it is Mario Kart 64 in particular, the turning is quite tight, which means that when you hop, basically, when you do the little hops around the corner, it is a very... you have to take those angles differently than you would in a modern Mario Kart game, essentially, right? The time at which you turn, the angle at which you turn, the amount of drift that you get, and the reliance on drifting and building up the kind of fire that you get in modern games is less so here. You still have it, and you still see the color changing on your tires, but it feels like if you're a noob at Mario Kart and you don't know about drifting around corners, just turning the analog stick to turn will probably actually put you in better stead in this game, funnily enough, than any other Mario Kart games.
Most definitely. And yeah, it's really hard, but I mean, some of those tracks, Donkey Kong's Country Parkway or whatever it's called, I love that track so much. It might be my favorite track in that game. Yoshi's Valley is just hilarious, all the routes and the skiddy sliding combined with such a maze of a course is just kind of hilarious. But also
when you go off the ramp and it just pings you in that exact direction, if your angle going onto the ramp is not correct, then you're just going to go wildly off course, which is of course very, very in keeping with the way that game was built. I think the funniest thing for me was there's just a bunch of words when you do stuff on the screen. So vroom will come up a bunch. Poomph, I think it was it poomph? Yeah, poomph is when you land on the ground. Whir, if you get hit by a banana, you'll spin around and the word whir will be above your head. So it's really interesting that they almost cartoonize it, right? It feels like an animated show or something where oh no, slipped on a banana, and there's a word above your head to indicate the noise that's happening. And I wonder if that was just an idea because the kart races themselves are still sprite based, and so they don't fit as well into the kind of polygonal world. So yeah, but I found that really interesting as a thing that I had never really paid attention to before in Mario Kart 64, but stands out now when you think about it. It's oh, they don't do that anymore. Why? And why do they do it back then? It's a really curious choice that they made.
It also makes you realize that the older Mario Karts just did not have many tracks or modes. There's four Grand Prix, 4 tracks in each, and there's time trials, which you can't even save ghosts on because of the whole data thing, which we can get to. But
yeah, because it required a pack, right? There's I think the expansion pack, not to be confused with this expansion pack, the PAK as opposed to PACK.
Right.
There's also the memory pack, I think, was one of them, which added a bunch of RAM. Maybe the expansion pack was a memory pack, but there's also Rumble pack, right? And so because you couldn't have, I believe this is the case, unless you had to do multiple controllers, having multiple packs on an N64 game at once, I'm just, this is a thing that obviously emulators and other people have figured out by this point, and Nintendo still haven't.
But the memory pack goes into the N64 itself.
Oh, right. Okay.
Right,
So
yeah.
that didn't go into the back. That wasn't a
No.
controller thing.
No.
Got you. Okay. So maybe they don't have any excuses then, because I was thinking like, okay, if
Yeah.
you're taking up with the Rumble, then like
Yeah.
emulator wise, does that make logical sense? But
Yeah.
I guess not. I guess it's fine.
But it's just it is kind of startling just how few modes and how few tracks.
Yeah.
And like we are so lucky to have so much more in Mario Kart, even though we don't have like stuff like a mission mode, which I know was great in the DS game. I'd love that to come back, but it's quite a lean game, but it's still a really good game. I think multiplayer, and it works.
I mean, at the end of the day, it's kind of the same with Mario Kart 8 when you think about it, right? There isn't, I guess the single player mode for Mario Kart 8 is pretty much the same, which is just do all the GPs, albeit a lot more modes and kart races and that stuff.
I mean, I'm a sucker more for number of tracks, because I can do those same modes for much longer if there's tons of tracks. Whereas
Totally,
Mario Kart 64, like, you know, we played every GP bar one, you know, and we weren't playing for that long. So
no, and we didn't do great in them, I will say.
No, it's hard.
It's interesting because, like, I did beat you in a couple of those races, and
once I warmed up, though, I was hard to beat.
You getting there. Which, but the funny thing is like you weren't dominating, you weren't winning every race, which usually in a Mario Kart game against CPU, you're able to do that.
Unless it's Mario Kart 7, come on.
Yeah, of course, yes. Yeah, my when I'm the king of the hill, of course. But I do think 64 is a fucking hard game. Like
it's hard.
they really like. Same with the Super Nintendo one.
It's hard, yet at the same time, it is easy for noobs because there's not much benefit to the the drifting. So like it's that weird combination of the two.
It feels like the rubber banding and stuff is pretty harsh, right? Like
it's harsh. It's very harsh.
And I think that they developed the difficulty of Mario Kart to the point where by GameCube maybe it was still quite difficult, but then after that, like I think they had kind of found a balance. But yeah, with this game it is brutal, and I was like, I had the chance, Bally, obviously I tweeted about this, to make my 64th game that I beat this year to be an N64 game, and I was like, what if I beat a GP and come in first? Is that how I do it? And I started doing that, and I gave up immediately. I was like, fuck, this is not going to happen. This is so hard. Also, the way they distribute points in that game is fucked up. Like, the winner...
96310, so you have to come fourth or better to...
And coming fourth basically is pointless because you get 1 point versus the first place person who gets 9 points, which is like astronomically puts you ahead. So like coming first and second matters massively in this game.
I completely forgot that point system, because when it happened I was like, what the hell? This is insane.
Crazy. I think that was the funny thing, is because I actually ended up winning the first GP, and it was because I came second in one of the races.
Right.
And that gave me just a big points boost, essentially.
Yeah.
Which was
also,
crazy.
It's interesting what you're saying about the rubber banding, because while there is a lot of rubber banding, I don't think it's linked in an intrinsic way to the items as much as it is with the recent ones. And what I mean by that is, I think you have a lot more items and stuff going for you if you're at the back and working your way through the pack.
Yeah.
In the newer Mario Karts, I feel like you have to work a bit harder in Mario Kart 64, even though there is some rubber banding. Like, I just think it's more to do with the physics necessarily than the items themselves.
Yeah, and it's also like there are certain red shells that you'll fire off, and you'll be like, why didn't that track somebody, right?
They just hit into the side. The
they just go to the side of the
awful.
wall.
Yeah,
They hadn't fully figured it out yet, right? Like, it is still clearly a series in development as you kind of play it, and it's still cool, man. I still really like Mario Kart 64. I have obviously a lot of good memories of battle mode at your house playing on.
We need to play some more. Yeah, it's really good vibes, and
yes.
I mean, the track that I associate the most with that game, I think, is the track on the cover, is like Toad's Turnpike, which is in the second Grand Prix that we never did, and it's come back in, I think, maybe the Wii version, or maybe
it's the one with the trucks and the lorries and stuff on the road.
Yeah, it's got the trucks and the cars, and it's basically a figure of 8 with trucks and cars.
Yeah, that was the GP that I tried to do to beat, and I think I hit a car like maybe 12 or 13 times, and did not do well in that race. Are you interested in going back and winning all the GPs on 50 and 100 and 150? Is that something you're willing to do?
I mean, I'll do it sometime that I just want to blast through some podcasts maybe, but I'd rather do another stream or play online. That'd be my preference. But I might.
We should do some battle mode for sure.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Cool. We played a couple of other N64 games as well. Mario Tennis was probably the one that you are the most still dominant at when it comes down to it. You just like have the muscle memory and the just like. You've played that game a lot, I feel.
I've played it a lot, yeah. It's a good time. I've played quite a bit of that away from our live stream, just listening to podcasts, going through tournaments. It's a good time. Again, there's not many modes, and you can't obviously transfer your Game Boy Color character over in this version, but it's really fun. And it was fun when we one-on-one. It was a bit brutal.
Just tell them, Bally. I'm shit, basically. That's how it goes. I'm just terrible.
But with
I got
doubles, I think it evened out a little better, and it was a little tighter, and that was fun. I thought
it might be better if I have the most difficult CPU and you have one down.
Oh, that's a shout. Yeah, we should have done that. I'd be up for that again.
Yeah, because I'm bad at Mario Tennis, and you
just need a bit of practice. You're not that bad. I've put in a lot of hours into that game.
Yeah, true. I don't know. It's one of those things that I was always bad at as a kid, and I still feel like I'm bad at now, and I don't know if that will ever change.
But you've experienced the game that Waluigi first appeared in. I think that is very important.
And I played as Waluigi.
And you played as him with his glowing evil eyes in the replays, which is just so bizarre.
Yeah, it looks really nice as well. The other thing I'll say about these games is playing them handheld is great because they are all up-resed to 720p, which means that crispness on the screen is really sharp. It's a good-looking kind of elements anyway, I should say, because obviously the sprite work in Mario Kart doesn't hold up because it's sprite work and it's blurry, and the menus don't hold up because that menu stuff is blurry. But when you're looking at polygonal stuff, that scales really, which is why I think Mario Tennis is so good, because all those characters are polygonal and the courts are polygonal, so it has that sheen and that kind of crispness that you want.
But also Mario Kart is 1995, I want to say, and then Mario Tennis is 2001. It's quite
very
a
late
jump. And all consoles, I think end of era N64 games do actually look really good. Also games like Pokemon Snap, Pokemon Stadium 2, these are all coming out around 2001, and I think they are some of the best looking N64 games.
For sure, yeah. Some really good stuff at the end there. Obviously, you had stuff like Dinosaur Planet that then got moved over.
Yeah.
To
God, I hope they put Pokemon Stadium on. We need to play some of that.
Yes, I would love to do a stream where we go through and fight the Elite Four and do the gyms.
We just strategize on stream and just go for it.
Yeah. We get rental Pokemon. We do what we did when we were kids. Such a good time.
Wait.
Love that stuff. So I hope that happens. We'll see. A couple of other games that we checked out because they had multiplayer modes. I'd never played Dr. Mario before, and I don't think you had either.
No.
And that was interesting. I think there was...
It looks like a Super Nintendo game.
It really does, yeah. It was basically just all 2D. There's not much going on.
It must be early era.
Yeah, I mean, it's a puzzle game, right? So what can you really do to snazz up Dr. Mario?
That's also true.
It's a falling block thing. And I think I felt a little lag in terms of how long it took to turn pieces and get them in the right order and stuff like that.
It was 2001.
Was it that late?
Yeah, apparently.
But that game, I think is cool, and I kind of want to go back to it and figure it out a bit more, because neither of us have ever really been big Tetris people or into those types of falling block games in a big way.
We need a bit of a Nintendo lure to get us in there, right?
Yeah, and I think that I would like to check out Dr. Mario 64 a bit more. It worked well as a multiplayer thing as well, very easy to just do head-to-head, and I didn't really understand how it worked in terms of putting blocks on one person's things, but what I did find is that if you fuck up very quickly, and you will...
It goes south.
It goes south quick. Really fast.
Because viruses start so high up compared to Tetris. Like Tetris, you're going to the bottom. If you make a few fuck ups, so they all go to the bottom and then you recover from there. Whereas this, it's right in your face. You kind of
start with a board that's fucked already, and you kind of have to work hard at the beginning just to clean it up, and then after that, it feels like you can build from there. But yeah, it's cool. And I maybe I'll check out a more modern version of Dr. Mario, because I think there are quite a few out there. I think there was a 3DS one at some point. Yeah, might have to take a look at that. But Dr. Mario, pretty cool.
And they just wound up the mobile game.
Yeah, they just killed that, so that you can never play. Also, that wasn't really Dr. Mario. It was you were sending pills up the way, and it was individualized puzzles. It wasn't really Dr. Mario. It was a weird thing.
Just his branding.
Yeah, pretty much. It was the inverse of what you would expect from that type of experience. So, Star Fox 64 also exists, which we played the multiplayer of, which seems not good for two people, is what I'm going to take away from that, essentially.
The control mapping is a bit weird, and one-on-one dogfights I've never really enjoyed in multiplayer video games. And
it's because you're kind of going, but it's oh, they're behind you. Okay, let's take this really long turn to try and find you again. Okay, you're in my sights now. Okay, and it's a long war of attrition to see whose health bar disappears first, which I imagine would be a lot more fun with 4 people, because then you're teaming up against each other. You're trying to single out different people. That sounds like a better time. one versus one didn't really make sense.
No.
Are you interested in jumping back into Star Fox 64? Because you played the 3D version, obviously, and going through a run, because like a run takes what, like 40 minutes or whatever to get through.
Could maybe do a run if we did something. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe.
I have not seen most of that game because I didn't like it and then decided to not play. I did one run through.
Oh, you never picked up again. So you
lent it to me. You lent me the 3DS version, and remember what happened was I played one run and decided I didn't like it and didn't play any more of it, basically. So
I mean, I think the 3DS one will be much nicer looking, and I think that is quite important for a game like that. I think it is nice to. I would personally play the 3DS one.
I guess I own it now. I guess I have it whenever I want. So if I did want to, and the nice thing actually about this version is there's save states, right? And that's the thing we haven't really brought up is there's no rewinding on the N64 games. Probably because it's harder to do rewinds on bigger 3D games like that. And
shame.
Yeah.
That would have been really cool.
Yeah, I actually was reminded when I was listening to RFN that on the Wii days, we had, when you would leave a game, it would suspend it. So a Super Nintendo game would actually suspend, which meant when you loaded back into it, even if your Wii was turned off and everything, it would put you back where you were. So like with Super Metroid, I remember this happening of like, I would have a suspend and I'd go back. But with N64 games like Ocarina of Time, that wouldn't be the case. And it would load you from the main menu every time and you have to reboot it. So, I think
that was such a great feature that they improved on with the Wii.
Totally. But it seems like we do have save states, but we just don't have the rewind function. So it feels like, if GameCube games were ever to be there, it feels like that would be the same thing where they wouldn't be able to rewind those games just because it's harder to do so. It was pretty good.
It's a shame. Rewind would be so good for like Mario Sunshine or something.
My God, would it ever? Holy shit. Like some of those levels of like going up behind the back of the fucking waterfall thing and doing those crazy jumps. Lots of resets happened when I played that game and it was not... It's not ideal, I'll say. So it would be nice. But hey, save states are great, and I'm glad that we have those too. So there's a bunch of other stuff on there. I obviously want to play Sin and Punishment at some point. Sin and Punishment is that eternal game of like, Bally, we're going to do a backlog club on this at some point, right? And
if people don't vote for it, how are we meant to play it? That's the thing,
Well, yeah, of course. I was going to say we should have put it into this poll, but you had the idea of just doing Genesis games, which was a bit cleaner.
Gotta keep it
made sense.
Yeah. We'll do a much cleaner N64 poll next year.
When they add more games, I think, right?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, that'd be good.
There's loads of other good games.
And if Sin and Punishment doesn't win, then I'm just gonna fucking play the game. All right, I need to just play it.
We got a losers bracket to do.
I don't know. My patience is running out. I already bought the game on Wii U and now I have it for free on Switch. Come on, man.
It's been a while.
So I do want to play that, and that looks great. Win back, I do want to get to. But what I will say at the moment, when I want to boot up one of these services, I'm booting up the Genesis more often than the N64 just because there's nothing interesting for me to go in and play single player really on N64 at the moment, and I want them to add, back when Banjo-Kazooie gets there, I'll play that for sure, like...
If you're a younger gamer who's never played Mario 64 or Ocarina of Time, I think, this service is pretty
great,
to be honest, because like those are fantastic games.
Absolutely.
And, I know that we've played the remakes, especially in the case of Ocarina of Time, but like that original still holds up. Like it's good.
It still does. I was playing some of that actually. I did get through Deku Tree, so I'm actually in the middle of Deku Tree right now. So yeah, I'll probably go back to that. The number of times I've played the start of Ocarina of Time is probably very, very high. I've just booted that game up a bunch because it's the classic. Everyone knows what's going on with that. So N64, that's that. We'll come back to more of the Switch Online stuff in a bit, but let's take a little break from that and talk about another video game, a little indie game that came out and has been doing quite well for itself. It's a game called Unpacking, Bally. Now this was shown off, I think, over the summer in one of the E3 events, some indie event, and I thought, oh, that's pretty cool. Like, it's a neat idea. You're basically taking boxes, you're moving into a place and you're just putting things in a room and in different rooms and kind of situating yourself essentially, and I thought it's a cool idea, unique, but this game is really interesting in a way that I didn't quite expect and thought was very cool narratively, and often we talk about on the show of like how video games can tell stories in a way that no other medium can, and I think Unpacking does that in a really unique way that I've not quite seen before. So you've played this, I played this. It's a short game. How long do you think it took you? About 4 hours or so?
Yeah, 3-4 hours. Yeah, it's a good length for what it does.
Bite size.
And the final level's quite, takes a long time.
A bit more extended.
But it's very satisfying when you do it, and
So yeah,
I loved this game.
Yeah, what are your thoughts on Unpacking and this whole idea, Bally?
I loved it so much. I think that just the mechanical aspect of taking the things, putting them in the places, I would have enjoyed that as it was, like a lot on its own.
There is a real satisfaction to it. There was a viral tweet that was going around of like someone placing an object on all these different parts of the house, and every time you put it down on something different, the sound would be different depending on like if it's a carpet or if it's a cardboard box or if it's a tile floor or if it's a wooden floor. And apparently there are 14,000 of those sound bites in the game.
Right, because it's all the items times by all the surfaces, I guess, right?
Pretty
so
much.
It's just so many.
Fucking wild. But it's the level of polish that you really feel it when you're playing the game, because it has that really nice, satisfying, like, it's a game feel thing, which I think ordinarily people wouldn't necessarily know unless they thought about it, but like it's part of the reason the game feels so good to play is because you're just like plopping things down, and the way it sounds is just so satisfying and neat,
and like superb pixel art design, like real nice,
beautiful
look
stuff
to it. So yeah, just like mechanically and visually alone, I would have enjoyed this game a ton. But then the kind of wider message of like what you're doing and the different spaces that you are filling and unpacking things into, I loved it, because like I worked it out between the year of 2009 and 2019. So the flat that me and Caroline currently live in.
Yeah.
I moved 10 times, like on average once a year.
Holy shit, dude.
It completely sucks. Like there's nothing worse. Like it really sucks. And you know, this game makes you realize that yes, items that you move and pack and take out, and items that I really relate to as well. Like there was a whole lot of video game consoles in this game, which I loved, and they really were careful about making it
great with the eras as well. You know,
with
obviously
the eras.
The GameCube is very obvious, like, and the fun thing about that is you can also see the GameCube games, and you can kind of like, even though the pixel art is really tiny, you can figure out which game is which. Like, there's Zelda's in there and all this stuff. You know, it's
so
really cool.
And they've done it just enough where Nintendo won't get too grumpy. You would hope.
No, exactly. The GameCube looks very different. Like it's blue and it like has slightly different like parts to it. Same with the Game Boy Advance and the DS and the Wii actually that she has at some point. Yeah,
right.
Very cool.
But it makes you realize, if you haven't gone through the process of moving again and again and again, like items really are a part of us, and what value we place on particular items. For example, every time I unpacked her Game Boy or her 3DS as it evolved through the years, I would always put it by her bedside table. I was like, that's absolutely a really nice place to put it, because that's where I would want it in this setup. And, you know, I think that items are important and intrinsic to us, and it's really cool that this game conveys that in the same way that there's that little Eiffel Tower that you just think, oh, it's just a shitty little Eiffel Tower from what you presume Paris or whatever, and you know, you take it out, and that same one item you unload into like 5, 6, 7 different flats. You know, there's Eiffel Tower, and there's this repetition that you realize, oh crap, like some of these things have been with her since, I think the first year is 1995.
I think the little bus that you have when you're a kid is still there at the very last one, right? That tiny bus. And that says a lot, right? About like the person. And I think there's this thing, right? Of you can look at someone's room and someone's space and like form an idea of who they are, right? Like there is an identity that you can take from the things that people place value on and the things that people display and that type of thing. So I think it's so clever in being able to not only evoke that idea of like getting a sense of who this girl is, but then throughout the years as what she chooses to continue taking with her or what gets left behind, how that change and how she changes as a result of that. Really cool.
I mean, on that point, I think generally she keeps quite a lot of stuff. Like I feel like by the end you're cramming quite a lot of stuff into very small spaces, and you think you should probably get rid of most of these things. Yeah. But the way that placing items can convey stories, I don't want to spoil it too much.
So I'm going to say minor spoilers actually for kind of maybe midway through the game, because I think the small apartment that she has with her boyfriend is probably the best distillation of a lot of different things that this game does well. So like I can't remember what year it is, but it's kind of part way through the game, and she's moved in with somebody into a small apartment. And I think part of what makes this effective is you have more stuff than you can reasonably fit in this space, and so you get that tense anxiety feeling of shit, where do I put this? There's no space to put this. And like it's reflecting what she would have been feeling at that time trying to unpack. You know, if you move into a small apartment and you're like, fuck man, I've got all this shit. How do I fit it anywhere?
But it's not just that it's a small apartment. It's the fact that it's also a really wanky apartment. And what I mean by that is it's clearly a city apartment because you can see like the cars outside. It's
clearly super expensive and you're getting a tiny amount of space for what you're paying.
It's got like this black, silver, modern, clearly quite expensive look to it. And then on top of the fact that her boyfriend, he stores certain random, like very decorative objects in very elaborate ways, which prevents you from storing any of your stuff. So it's like you're getting a feel for this couple's relationship just by looking at the flat and unpacking boxes, which is just like this incredible like way to convey a story. And I think this is like summarized to a T, where your university diploma that you have put up proudly on the wall in all of your other flats, the game purposefully doesn't give you any space on any of the walls in this flat to put up your university diploma.
So there is one space where I did put it, which is above the toilet, and the game says no, you can't put it there.
Yeah, exactly. So what do you have to do? You have to put it under your bed.
Yeah,
it's like
hide it away.
How representative of that is that in this relationship? You know that she's been forced to put her university diploma that she's so proud of under the bed. Like that is just and what happens? Like they obviously break up and the game moves on.
It speaks volumes, right? It's such a clever mechanical way of conveying that part of like these people who you never see at all in the entire game, right? Like it's pretty crazy. There's no dialogue. There's
like that is like potentially moment of the year for me in like video games, because that is just so unique, something I wasn't expecting, didn't know about. And I saw someone share that on Twitter after I'd experienced it and was like, oh my God. Exactly. Like, I love it.
It's very cool. But there's other things like with that space as well, where there's a college space that she's staying in before that, and there's a bunch of stuff that she can't move. The game just doesn't let you move it. And then you get into the bedroom in this apartment and you can actually move his shit around. So I was like, this dude is so fucking messy. Let's go into this sock drawer. Fucking get your socks in order. I moved all his socks into the correct order. His ties were fucking sitting out there. Put those ties in the drawer. And I'm like, wait a second. I'm just getting into the mindset of this girl here.
You just Mary Kondo'd his ass.
Exactly. And I'm like, oh my God, this dude, he just fucking leaving his shit all over the place. And so like while I'm putting all my underwear and stuff in the drawer, I'm like fixing his at the same time. But then it also is reflective of like, well, the game doesn't let you move his posters off the wall, but it does let you do that. So I think like there are ways in which it's even more subtle by doing that certain stuff, and what you're able to interact with and what you're not able to interact with, which by the end of the game, once you own your own place and stuff, you can kind of move everything about and you have autonomy and you see that progression. So there are a couple more story beats that are really cool that I don't want to spoil, and I think the game is just a very, very cool idea. What I will say is I did get not burned out necessarily, but like you are doing the same thing quite a bit, like obviously taking things out.
I was pretty done by the end. I agree.
Yeah, and putting them in. And so like I took a couple of breaks in between. I probably played it over 4 days or so total, just because like you are, a lot of it is maybe the navigational stuff. I was playing on PC, so it's a little different, I guess, because like mouse and moving to the side of the screen to scroll things and scroll out was maybe a bit easier than working with a controller. On Switch it's touchscreen, of course, which helps quite a bit, and so you can move stuff. But yeah, I think it's a very unique experience, and one you can only really get in games.
Question.
Yes.
Did you ever unload stuff onto a bed or the floor, or did you do it one by one straight from the box?
I kind of went back and forth at some times when I was like, I just want to dump all this. Like when I was doing my clothes, for example, I would try and dump all the clothes out first so that I had them all, so I see what I had, and then start putting them on the hangers and then start putting them in the drawers. But with other stuff, I would be like, let me think about where this goes, place it there. Next thing, okay, maybe that goes there. So like, there are ways in which you could do it. I've heard a lot of people who just like dumped everything out, and I didn't do that because I think that kind of takes some of the joy away from it, of like slowly unboxing and putting everything in place. But I totally see how you would be able to do that, and it would make sense. But yeah.
Yeah, I predominantly just took it from the box, but there were just some times where you just had to get it all out there and work it in. Especially the kitchens.
There are some times where just like the box is in the way, you know, and you can't see behind the box. So that could be a little bit of an issue sometimes of like, oh, there's a drawer behind here, but I can't really see.
There's no camera movement. You can zoom in and zoom out, but there's no... That's a very purposeful decision, which I probably broadly agree with, even though it has a couple of negatives where there's sometimes you just can't quite identify quite how big a space is or how something fits or doesn't fit. But it's a very minor gripe generally. Yes.
The other really cool little polish thing that I love is if you open a drawer or like something is in the way, it will just like it'll like butt against it. So like
there's like an animation just for it. Yeah.
So if you try and close the cupboard and a drawer is still open, it like butts against the drawer and you're like, oh shit, I need to close the drawer, and then it's just a tiny little polish thing, but it makes such a difference in terms of like the tangibility of the space, you know, like it's so cool. So yeah, I think this game is great. People should check it out. It's on Switch and loads of other places. Called Unpacking. One of the most unique narrative experiences in games I've played in a little while. So Very cool. Definitely worth checking out. Let's go in a totally different direction. I don't want to have my voice there. I'm going to fucking Australia. Maybe I am if I've got to be walking this far. I've been walking outside a lot more because of Nintendo/Niantic's new project, Pikmin Bloom. A video game, quote unquote. Is it a video game? Who could say, really? So I don't know. Have you downloaded this, Bally, and checked it out at all?
I downloaded it. I went for like a short walk and then I was pretty unwell with everything. So I
weren't really in a place to be going outside. Makes sense. Exactly. I've been using it for about, I don't know, I was saying 6 days now or so, since like Wednesday. Cool. And I think it's really cool. I wouldn't really call it...
What's your average step count in those days, would you say?
Oh god, you fucking exposed me here. Like 6,000 probably.
That's
like
pretty good. That's all right.
What I really notice is the days that I don't go for my lunchtime walk, it's just abysmal. It's like 1,500. Like fucking hell. I'm just sitting on a chair the whole time and not moving and doing anything. And actually yesterday when I didn't go out, I was like waiting for stuff in the microwave, and I was like, I'm just gonna walk around the house a bunch and get my step count up. So yeah, it's having an effect. It's having an effect, which is cool. So I had never actually even downloaded Google Fit onto my phone, which is what you need for a step counter, because Pikmin Bloom basically hooks into existing fitness stuff that your phone has and then uses that.
So on iPhones it's already on, like it's
it must be part of the OS, yeah, I imagine. So yeah, you kind of have to get that on Android if you don't. And basically what happens is that you collect these Pikmin and you feed them fruit that they find while you're walking, and you feed them nectar from that fruit, and then they're kind of little flower buds, and you can tap on the flower and it gives you flower petals, and then when you go on a walk you can say, oh, I'm going to start spreading flower petals, and so as I walk, my entire path, the route that I go, will have a trail of flowers behind me, and so at the end of the walk you can look back basically and see, oh, that's where I went, and we'll show you the line of where you... It's almost like, you know how in Breath of the Wild you go to your map and it shows you where you went over the map. It's kind of like that, I guess. But for
now, someone can stalk me.
Yeah, totally, exactly. Now they know exactly where I have walked, every inch of which they knew already. Let's be honest. There's fucking all the data on us out there. But
True.
I think it's really cool. So there's a couple of reasons why. One is it's just encouraging people to go outside and walk more, which is good. And I think that's something that everyone probably should be doing a lot more, because we're all, especially with COVID, like inside our house all the time and not going anywhere and that type of thing. But it also like gives you incentive to do that because you're getting new Pikmin. You can also name the Pikmin when you get them, which is a little weird because Pikmin I've always thought of like as a homogenous whole, right? Like I never really think of them as individuals.
They're disposable. Why would you name
you know what? Yeah, they die and they go, little ghosts happen. So yeah, naming them might be a little bit...
That would be brutal if they let you name them in the main games. Just seems... it's a very bad idea.
Just a recipe for disaster. However, you can do that here. And a funny way that I've been naming them is whatever road I was on when I got them, I'll just name them after that road, or like have a spin on that. Or like... depending on like what I did that day. So I went and had dinner with my sister, and during lunch that day I actually at work had a donburi for lunch, and so I went out to get my donburi, and while I was waiting for it to be cooked, I was checking my app and it was like, oh, you got a new Pikmin. I just called it donburi, so that's the Pikmin I got when I got my donburi at work, basically. Like little, and it's a good like kind of calendar tracker of like memories, because at the end of the day it will ask you, okay, I'll show you three faces: sad face, neutral face, happy face, and you just click one of them to say like, what was your mood today? How did you feel about today? And then you can choose a picture from your photo album, and it attaches that photo to that day. So it basically gives you a little bit of a kind of, memory book of, where did I walk that day? Where was I? What was I doing? And how did I feel?
So it won't go like, remember when you had this sad day back here, and here's this photo to remind you. It will always filter to the good stuff.
I don't know if you can like go back and look at it if you want. I don't know if there's an easy way to look through everything, but it's kind of a nice reference point for, I don't know, if you ever wanted to just go back and scroll at one point in time and remember what was going on. But yeah, it's really neat. It has encouraged me to take some more pictures as well, because I was realizing, the only picture I had from today is this screenshot of the Forgotten City that I beat yesterday. So I guess that's my picture of the day.
Happy face.
Yeah, happy face for that day. That was great. So yeah, it's not really a video game is what I'm going to say. It's like, it's a nice addendum to a fitness app. Yeah. And I think that's a cool thing, because I think people try to gamify fitness a lot, and like especially with step counters. A lot of people in my family, extended family, have step counters, and I've never really been that into them. But I think like there's this slight added layer here that gets me into it, not only because it's like a Nintendo skin on something, because I'm an idiot, of course I'm going to go.
Everyone needs their own step counter for them. You know? Like there's other ones where I know there's like running apps where you'll essentially like headphones in, running away from zombies and shit.
Right, there's
and
podcast stuff like that.
Right.
Yeah, storytelling. And
it's like, I definitely think everyone's got their own thing if they want to harness it for fitness and that sort of thing. And yeah, I love all those ideas, and I think this sounds awesome. I hope that now I'm feeling a bit better. I can, experience the spreading of petals.
Yeah, pretty much. You can also send them out on expeditions, so like you'll have more than enough Pikmin, so you have 6 at a time as your crew, and then you can send out the other ones on like it's like Metal Gear Solid 5. You just go send them out on like recon missions basically to go find fruit. There's also like big flowers that you can see on the GPS map that I've not really figured out what to do with those yet. And supposedly you can also see other people who are nearby if they've walked around.
Have you seen anyone else yet?
No, I mean, I've been in main city London one day with it so far, and I will be again this week, so I'm sure I'll keep an eye out for that.
Did you say you've already been in the centre of London?
I have, yeah, but that was kind of...
And you didn't see anyone then?
That was the first day I had it, and it had only just come out that day in the UK. So
not everyone's as keen as us.
It was very fresh, so I don't know. Yeah, I might need to check that out and see. By the time I go there this week, I'm sure that it will be more populated, I imagine. So hopefully there'll be a bit more going on. But you can add people as friends on there. I've been given gifts by people. I put my friend code on Twitter, so you can go find that and add me if you want. So yeah, I think it's a fun little thing, and have enjoyed walking so far. I guess you're
going to keep going with it. Shall I have a Pikmin Bloom check-in next time?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I'm going to continue to walk. I had been doing that regardless. I usually do a lunchtime walk, and I think this holds me a bit more accountable. It's like, oh man, I didn't do enough steps today. Definitely going to get out there and do it. So yeah, it's real cool. Pikmin Bloom. There was also obviously the Animal Crossing DLC / update that happened, which I have checked in with a little bit. It's interesting because jumping back into Animal Crossing is hard, I find, at this point in time, just because everything is like already set, and I'm like, where do I start? Where do I go? What do I need to buy? How do I get all the items, and how do I find all the new stuff? And I think I'm probably going to have to do a bigger check-in next time, because I haven't actually checked out Happy Home Paradise yet, which is a whole separate DLC. I didn't realize you had to download that. You had to go to the eShop and actually click download on Happy Home Paradise. It's in Animal Crossing itself, but you actually have to go and download it to add to the game.
Why didn't they just make it part of the update? And they put a key in.
If you have a Switch Online service, yeah, they should have done that. But because, I don't know.
I mean, Nintendo. If you don't want to print money,
yeah, of course,
come to me.
So I've only just downloaded that today. But the update stuff, it took me a while to be like, okay, where do I go? I need to go to that, like the town center, to get all the recipe stuff, and there's just certain items that I'm just like, how do I get carrots and potatoes to start growing? Because I want to start doing a little patch, like a little farm patch, and do my little kind of baking of food. I made a stone kitchen today. I made a pear smoothie. So like the stuff is there. You just kind of have to find it. And I think that's the hardest part at the moment, which makes it trickier because you go to Harv's Island, which is where what's his face? The little seedling guy, the guy who sells you plants and flowers, yeah? Leaf,
Right.
I think is his name. I needed to get him, but to get him, aside from him showing up randomly, to get him on Halves Island, you have to pay a gyroid 100,000 bells, and then I have to wait until the next day for him to come. Same with Brewster. I didn't realize. I was like, I have to go out to an island to find Brewster.
Really?
Yeah, you have to go on one of Capin's tours, so Capin is there.
And there's nothing telling you that.
No, it does tell you, but it's
Okay.
just I think because the first couple of days of playing it, I didn't go off and do all that stuff, and so now I'm like, oh, and now I have to wait another day in order for him to come to the island and actually set up shop and all that stuff. So it reminds me of the time gating that Animal Crossing does, that is fine and it's good when you were first starting the game because that's how it works, but it's hard when you're coming back to the game and I'm like, give me all the new stuff, give me all of it at once. And Animal Crossing is like, no, this is Animal Crossing, you have to wait until we're ready, because on that Halves Island, there are like 7 or 8 different gyroids you can talk to recruit people. And look, my fucking bank is overflowing. I'm a billionaire, they say, right? I have 11 million bells. I can pay for all of these shops in one day. They cost 100,000 each. Fucking chump change, mate. I just fucking throw it out there. But the game says, nope, we're not taking any more donations for today. Come back tomorrow. Which means I have to spend 8 or 9 days in a row going to the island, talking to a gyroid, paying it 100,000, waiting for the next day for one more person to be added to the island. I get it. That's what Animal Crossing is. You do have to check in every day. That's kind of the point of it. But it's a little disappointing when I just want to jump in and get all the new stuff straight away. And it's like, you gotta wait. We're gonna have to, put a little pen on you.
Do you think they've got some stats to back up this idea that we can actually get people to play longer the more we stagger stuff across days, right? That's their
Nintendo's
number one
objective.
aim with this game, right?
Of course, right? Like they want me to continue playing and picking it up every day. I get it. It makes sense.
But it's so manufactured, it's just a bit annoying. Yeah,
it just
because
reminds
if you bought
me
all those things and we're having a really good time, you would come back the next day, wouldn't you?
Yeah,
like,
totally.
To do more stuff. You don't have to do this. It's just a bit frustrating.
And like it just reminds me of some of the more annoying elements of Animal Crossing, which is like, okay, well, Capin's going to sing his song every time we go to the island, and I can press B to fast forward through it, and he'll be mad at me and sad, and that feels bad, but also like, can we just get buttons to skip all the dialogue at this point? I don't need it. It's unnecessary. It's a lot, and it's charming to some degree, but in a game where you're doing it so many times every day, it takes a bit too much. So anyway, I'm sure I'll be much more positive on it when I actually get to all the stuff I want to do and I start designing different parts of my island. There's some great stuff of like, I just learned the recipe to make a ladder that's a permanent ladder, and so I had my restaurant stage that I needed to have that there, so making those and setting that up, it's going to be great. I'm going to have a whole new part of my island. It's going to look fantastic. I just need to get there. And then I'm also going to check out the DLC stuff as well, which seems great and seems like a fun time. I've been seeing a lot of pictures of that on Twitter of people playing that stuff. So yeah, dig into it more next time on the show. Let's talk a bit more about the Switch Online service, because we have got some Genesis games that I've been checking out. First things first, I want to just update you on Caveman Gate that has been ongoing since my childhood of trying to find this Caveman game.
Years and years.
Yeah, I've been playing Prehistorik Man on the Super Nintendo, so check that game out. It's pretty cool. It's weird. It's level-based and is a caveman side-scroller. You have a club that you can transform into a frog at some point. Like, your weapon turns from a club.
Okay, well, let's get to the chase. Is this the game?
No, it's not the game. This is not the game.
Okay, it's not the game. Right.
Not the game. I don't know if I will ever find the game.
Okay.
But yeah, so you got a club. You can upgrade that to a frog that you can throw at enemies. It's your kind of classic Super Nintendo side-scroller, but with a bit of weirdness thrown in of like, sometimes you'll go into a level and there'll be an objective that's like, find all the 4 bits and bobs that you need to get to the end.
Collecting.
Which is a little... those levels were annoying, and, some of them are like, oh, you got to scale up the center of a tree, and they're different interesting spaces. The controls aren't great. There's one level where you're like on a kind of unicycle almost. It's like, we just figured out how to make a wheel, use this to jump over a gap and stuff like that. So there's a level that kind of uses a vehicle in that way, and you have to do platforming with it. Control's not amazing. It's interesting, but it's like, weird and interesting in the way that lots of like middling to average platformers were back in the Super Nintendo era. And it's not too long. I bashed through it without too much trouble, and enjoyed it for what it was. But Prehistorik Man is definitely not as good. I think I enjoyed Joe and Mac more. Joe and Mac was more interesting, and I think there's another Joe and Mac game that I haven't played on there, so I'll probably check that out too. My goal again, to play every caveman game in existence, to finally figure out which one I played as a child.
Are you confident that when you do play the one that you played, you will actually know it?
I think so.
You think so?
The problem is that like this is the hazy memory of 4-year-old me.
I know that's the problem. I'm not entirely convinced you will know for sure when you do. That's my worry. That's my worry.
Well, but you know what? There. It won't stop me from trying Bally, for God's sake. So, anyway, Prehistorik Man, check it out. It's on the Switch Online. 2 other games that I checked out. The first day the Genesis thing dropped, I was like, here we go, Castlevania game, let's get on it. So I played through Castlevania Bloodlines. This is a game that I watched Vinny play through back on Giant Bomb when he was doing Vinnyvania, going through all the Castlevania games. It's one of those ones that when I think back on it is like, it's pretty weird and kind of off the wall in a way that the other Castlevania games weren't. Like, the characters that you play at are kind of weird and stocky. Like the main character, John Morris, has these kind of like massive shoulders and is just like a bit different in terms of size compared to your usual Castlevania protagonist. But you can also choose from 2 characters from the start. So you can choose from John, who's your standard whip protagonist, who just uses a whip. There's also Eric, who I had never seen a playthrough of before. So I decided to play through as Eric. And Eric uses a spear instead of a whip. So you can you still have a good amount of range on it because it's a spear. But the difference is, and I found this out when I got to a point, there are certain parts of the levels where you can only get past them if you have the whip by like swinging to them and swinging on a thing, and there was no way for me to get past it as Eric, and I was like, how the fuck do people finish this game as this character? Turns out there's a different move that he can do where if you duck and crouch, you build up a kind of super jump, and then you can like leap with your spear beneath you to give you like almost like a pole vault to get you really high. And so before the room that you had to swing on with the whip, there's a room where you can go upwards, so you take a different route through the game essentially. So they've kind of built a little bit of non-linearity, and that depending on which character you are, there are points in the level where you're like, oh, I'm Eric, I have to jump up this place instead of swinging across this place, which is kind of neat and gives it good replay value. You know, back in the day, if people were playing this, it's a short game, like a couple of hours long at maximum. I think it probably only took me about an hour and a half going through, with save states and rewinds, of course, which is obviously a lifesaver when it comes to Castlevania games, because a lot of bullshit design in even the more modern ones of those. So really enjoyed it. I think it's a good fun game. Has a lot of weird boss fights. There's boss fights of like this mechanical being who's like made of gears, who like takes himself apart and like rolls it up in a ball and rolls at you. And yeah, there's a big kind of boss rush at the end that felt like really difficult if I didn't have the save states and all of the rewind features available to me. But yeah, there's a simple satisfaction that I continue to have in playing through Castlevania games. I obviously I could have played this on the Castlevania collection because I already own it on that. However, neither the Contra nor Castlevania collections, for whatever reason, have a rewind function. The Mega Man ones do, which is great, but those ones don't. I guess fuck Konami, right? Because it's them doing it in both cases. But yeah, the rewind feature certainly helped a lot in boss fights where you're like, oh, I accidentally took a hit when I didn't want to. Let's just go back a little bit. And yeah, enjoyed it quite a bit. Castlevania Bloodlines holds up. Probably, I would say, like middle tier in terms of the series, but a nice Castlevania game to blast through. Something about just the atmosphere, the music of those games, and just the cadence I love. So enjoyed going through that. And then I also, when I was on the toilet, played through a whole game on the toilet. It's called MUSHA. It is a shmup. It's like a kind of classic, top-down vertical shooter where you are a kind of Transformer / like Gundam person, and you are just like blasting away at enemies. And it does the typical thing where you collect things and your guns get more crazy and ridiculous as you go. Really fucking hard. Like, this was one where I was rewinding constantly and like save stating all the time. But a good kind of mindless, so I like this type of game when you have those features available to you. If you don't, then it's like a bit of pulling teeth because you're going to get hit like one bullet, and there's like thousands of bullets on the screen at any one time, right? Unless you're...
Oh, is it insta-death? Just one bullet?
One bullet, you're done. And so, well, in terms of number of lives, you maybe have 5 or 6, but then like when you run out of that then you get a number of continues. If you don't get the number of continues, you start from the start of the game again, right? Which I didn't want to do, of course. So, it's cool. Definitely recommend if you want a quick shooter that you just want to blast through. MUSHA, which stands for something that I can't remember. Something. It's an acronym or whatever you want to call that, for something crazy and long and complicated. But it was cool, if very difficult, and interesting. So yeah, I've enjoyed kind of digging into the kind of classic back catalogue here. Again, none of these games like mind blowing or anything, but for me, there's something about I just want to turn my brain off, man. I just want to play something I can finish in a night and like turn my brain off and listen to podcasts at the same time. And the Genesis collection or the Switch Online is great for that. It's like, pick a thing, man. Here's a fucking just dining table of games you've never heard of and never played before, and you can just blast through them without a second thought. So yeah, really enjoyed all of those. So yeah, I'll probably check in with some more of those. Obviously, we're playing Rye Star for next time, but I'm probably going to play Strider and Shinobi 3 in my own time regardless, so I might even talk about those next time on the show. We'll see.
Just burning through them.
Absolutely. That's the thing,
Bally. That next batch.
Yeah, that's the thing. When these Genesis games average a length of like 2 hours, it's so easy to just, especially with save states and rewinds, it takes you so much shorter of a time to go through them. So, it's an easy thing to knock out. Cool. All right, let's close it out, Bally, with one more video game that that apparently took over your life and
took over my life.
This has not happened for you in a while, I think, of a game coming out and you being like, I'm going to do nothing else but play this video game. It happened to me with Eastward, but this happened to you with Moonglow Bay. Tell me about Moonglow Bay.
I was so excited for this game. So this game, it's come out on PC, Series X, and Xbox One. And obviously, I'm not talking about it on our Nintendo show. The reason I wanted to bring it onto this show is that I actually think it's really appropriate for a Nintendo audience because it's that kind of Stardew Valley vibe. But also the fact that it's one of my Game of the Year contenders, genuinely. Like, I loved it that much. And initially, I was really fighting the game, so it's, for those who don't know, it's like a fishing simulator game, where you are meeting people in this town, and basically the town is very run down, and it's on you and your relationship, I won't spoil the story, but it's on you and like your partner, like your daughter, to reinvigorate the town by going and getting fish, and then so everyone in the town has a lot of money to spend on the fish that you buy, and then you use all the money that you achieve to reinvest back into the town, and there's a whole narrative that goes through it as well, but it's really cool like that. But anyway, initially I really had loads of issues with the game because it's very glitchy. It wasn't optimized. It's not optimized well at all. It's just, I lost my map, for example. It's like this glitch where your map just vanishes until you reach like this certain point in the chapter, which sucks. I would have been really stuck with that, like Reddit, for example, where people were like sharing their issues with the game. This game was already delayed by like a month or two, so it's a real shame that it's come out with so many glitches because it's kind of really dogged a lot of the kind of initial reviews, and I think it could have created more buzz for itself if it had just kind of not come out so glitchy and buggy. It was a shame. I also think it could have maybe come out on Switch. I think if they can fix this game and then release it on Switch, I really think that's a potential opportunity to create a few more waves. But anyway, I lost my map. I was getting stuck on all the geometry, and that's an issue that kind of persisted throughout a lot of the other chapters. Like whenever you're walking on land, a lot of it got stuck, and there's also like a glitch with the first end of chapter pseudo boss, and like these things just,
man, Bally, really building up this Game of the Year chat for this game.
I know, right? That's the thing. It's like, so by the end of chapter 1 I was like, I'm liking this a lot, but I love everything it's going for. I'm gonna stick with it. And it did have an update after about 3 days, so I did get that update.
But you'd be in the game by that point, right? 3 days.
So there were basically 3 days the game was out, and all the reviews were coming out with like, oh, it's glitchy, it's this, it's that, and I'd played like 1 or 2 hours.
Yeah, and that was kind of my experience as well, because I've downloaded it on PC. I played probably about 40 minutes or so, and I didn't have like glitches necessarily, but I did think that there's some weird stuff of like in the town. There's textures that like there's a hole in between. There's like blurry shadow textures for no reason on the ground. There's seams, you can see through the seams of the world, and just the camera angle on the town. I just found it really awkward, and it just made the game look bad in a way that the trailers don't, because I actually kind of like the visual aesthetic.
I did pull the camera back like you suggested, and it helped a ton. It also helped with the way the game ran, on top of the fact that I could see a wider angle. Which
is weird, because like theoretically having more stuff on screen should make it run worse, because it's loading in more assets, but I don't know why that was the case. But given like the character designs were very voxely and looked kind of cool, I was kind of disappointed with the look. Like it felt like there wasn't much of a vibe going on with it. But that said, I enjoyed the fishing and I enjoyed the cooking stuff, and I was like, well, there feels like there's something here. It feels like there's a loop here that could be enjoyable, and it seems like that caught you.
Yeah, it was, I mean, the art style did grow on me, but it is that loop of fishing, cooking, exploring, making money, and all these things that don't involve kind of exploring on land, I also think run better. But on top of that, I actually think this is one of the strongest gaming loops I've played like since Stardew Valley. It genuinely completely got me. It completely hooked me. Like I was just...
I mean, the fact that you played, 25 hours in like 5 days or something says quite a
bit. It was insane. But it's the way that like... It's the combination of learning the town and find the link between finding out tales from people in the town and then exploring the world on your boat. It's like this really great thing that I think a game like Stardew Valley just doesn't have in the same way. Like Stardew Valley, the management of your farm is really satisfying, and I love that. But the sense of adventure and exploring in Stardew Valley, sure, you've got like the mines and there are other parts of that world, but the world does feel a lot more smaller than it does in Moonglow Bay, where there's a real emphasis on telling tales about the wider world, almost like an open world game, to be honest. And like, imagine going to a bar, I presume in something like The Witcher, and someone tells you a tale about this monster that lives on the hill, and then you go and face the monster on the hill. This game has a lot of those feelings, and I really love that about the game, combined with this powerful economy and the loop of like getting fish, making money, creating meals, upgrading your boat, upgrading this, and that loop was just so strong. And something that helped tremendously with that loop, which I managed to do quite early on in chapter 2, I want to say, is like you gain the ability to sleep on your boat. So like before that point, you are making day trips on your boat to like go and get fish, come back, come back. By that point that you can then sleep on your boat, you are going much further out. You're getting much more valuable fish. You're at sea for days on end. And that feeling of coming back with a massive haul to the town.
Your boat just like fucking dripping, just absolutely overloaded.
Yeah, and you're like making all this money and you're investing it all. And I think the story plays in so well into that idea that you are like becoming this town hero by investing all this thing.
Yeah.
And the feeling of like going out for this massive haul and being 3-4 days at sea and coming back with all these fish that you would like. There's mechanic like Animal Crossing where you're donating fish to the museum, but you're not just donating fish to the museum for the sake of it like you're on Animal Crossing. In this game, they link that into the story about driving tourism to the town, and then you go and invest in the train station where the neighboring town, there's like a population to come and visit Moonglow Bay, and like they just do a lot of things, and the writing's really strong as well, which just supports the whole thing. On top of the fact, the soundtrack's by Lena Raine, who obviously did Chicory and Celeste, and I absolutely love her music. I do think this is maybe the weakest of the 4 out of those 3 games. But
I mean, I was bopping along. That was one of the things that kept me going, honestly, the first 40 minutes or so. I was like, yeah, there's fucking some tunes happening here.
But I say weakest of the 3. It's still a stellar soundtrack.
It's still so good, yeah.
So the writing, the gaming loop, the characters, it all came together in a way where I'd forgotten about all the kind of glitchiness that I'd faced in the first chapter. And I can't defend that there are glitches and things and janky stuff I faced, especially in one of the chapters later on. I want to say maybe chapter 5. But I don't care. I just don't care because like the other stuff was so good.
Yeah, no, I totally get that. I 100% understand where you're coming from, right? Like there are games like that where you just fall into it. Like I think Bloodstained is a great example of this for me, where I'm like, Yeah, I totally understand all your criticisms with the game and all these things. Don't give a shit. Loved the hell out of it, right? Like, absolutely loved everything going on. And that happens sometimes, right? Where you will find something that people will have all these problems with, and you'll be like, no, don't care about any of them. Just love this for what it is, right?
And it does that great thing where, a little bit like a Spiritfarer, you've got this kind of economics system gaming loop where you're going and getting things, turning it into materials or meals in this case, making the money. But there's also like this chaptered story throughout. I think this game does a better job of, yes, the wider story is very important, but if you just want to keep doing that gaming loop, you can keep going. And you can technically do that in a game like Spiritfarer, I guess, but
Stardew probably is a better example, I guess, of doing that type of thing, right? Like, just because I think the story's a bit lighter in Stardew, it's more optional, I guess, but you can just endlessly have your farm continue to grow and grow for years and years on end.
Yeah, I'm trying to say is I think this game has the best balance of, if you just want to do the simmy stuff and do that gaming loop over and over and over and over again, you can do that.
Yeah.
If you really want to enjoy the story and then end the gaming loop when that story ends, you can also do that. And I think the game does a really good job of marrying the two, where you are constantly in need of money and resources that link into the story, so that if you're doing tons and tons of fishing, it's not for the sake of it. It is impacting the story. You still need to go and do a ton of fishing to progress the story. And it wasn't like I didn't fully break the economy at any point. Sure, there are points where I had way too much money, and I just fed into the story in a really good way. I think they've absolutely nailed the pricing and economy of the game, which I think is so important in these kind of games. And yeah, I was absolutely blown away by this game. Like, I can't emphasize, if you want that Stardew Valley, it's scratched, but in a different way, that's a bit more exploration based. That I think there's just a different sense of production with the fact that it is these voxel characters and the soundtrack. And I felt very emotional, like by the end cutscene and like the final game things happening. I felt very emotional. I don't think I felt that emotional about Stardew Valley, even though I love that game probably more than this game. Like, I still think...
I will say the writing, even off the bat, is really good, and like, it's a kind of almost tragic setup, right? Like, and I think it's effective in what it has to say, and so far, I think it's pretty cool. So it's great to hear that it pays off in the end.
Yeah. This game, where Stardew Valley is like your farm that is your domain, and you go out and explore the town and then come back. The fact that your domain in this game is kind of like your boat and the bay, like Moonglow Bay, the little town, they become so familiar, and you get that sense of like, you get the sense of the culture of the little area, and the writing builds on that with the little tales. There's like a pub, a bar that you can go to, and people are telling you tales about, oh, I saw this fish one day years back, and it was at this particular point. And the system, it's got like Stardew Valley or any other game similar. It's got like a missions system where you can see all the things and put labels on the map
lots of mini quests that you can go
mini
on
quests, and it tracks all that stuff really well.
You also have like an encyclopedia or like a fishopedia, right, where you can go and check like all the different types of fish and if you've caught it or not, and
you've got all these different cooking things. I should also say the cooking's really fun. Like, I never got sick.
Do they change up the mini game much in terms of different meals you're making? Because I was enjoying it, and I was like, oh, I could see this getting a bit too much if you're doing this again and again too many times.
It does, and you maybe doesn't do it as much as I would like. However, you start the game being able to make 4 things at once, and then you can upgrade to making 20 things at once.
Oh,
so,
wow,
like,
okay.
Within one mini game. So like,
big jump, yeah.
That kind of helps all that become a lot more seamless, and you can really make a lot of money very quickly.
Sounds like Animal Crossing could take some lessons from this game in terms of batch making things a single time.
Yeah. I will say on the batch making thing, however, you to select lots of things, you have to press it like every single time. It's not like it's not got like any skip option or going back one, to go from 0 to 99. You can't do that. So, but these are things I do believe this team will update on small stuff like that.
Sounds like once all these patches have gone through and everything is kind of spick and span, that's the ideal place to play it,
If they could iron out everything and maybe like have another big marketing boost, if there was some sort of Switch launch next year or the year after, like, this game could be... It's only sitting on like a 72 on OpenCritic, and for all the faults that it had on launch, that is unfairly, in my view, that is a fair score, unfortunately. Like, you can't launch a game this buggy and expect to get a good Metascore, but like, if they could, get it all sorted, get it on Switch. I genuinely think, like a Stardew Valley audience, this is a phenomenal game, and definitely a Game of the Year contender for me. Like I could not be happy. And yeah, I can't remember the last time I beat like a 25-hour game in 4 days. Like, my weekend was like more Moonglow Bay than it was anything else.
That alone says a lot about how you feel about the game, right? Like, the fact that you dedicated that much time in that dense a period is, I think it speaks volumes.
Yeah,
right? So.
yeah. And it's that thing of, sure, you come into the bay, you drop off your fish at the museum, you go do your haul, you start doing your meals, you sell all your meals. And you're like, oh, but I've got this mission. I could go out again. And then you're lining up different missions within one sailing voyage.
Right,
it's just so satisfying. Just go out and you tick the boxes. You go, all right, I'm going to sail to that bit. I'm going to sail to that bit. And the map just expands in some really unexpected, fun, interesting ways. And like, this game isn't all what it says on the tin. There's more to it than, in terms of like its locations and what this game's vibes are going for, than you might expect at first. And it takes a while to get there, but like, this game's got some cool secrets that I think paid off for a really impactful story. So yeah, I couldn't recommend it highly enough when it's fixed.
When it's fixed, yeah.
Yeah, I will say it is fixed to a point where my biggest issues have been fixed, but there is still just a bit of jank. If you don't like a little bit of jank, then definitely wait. But it's if you can put up with a bit of jank, I do think the gaming looks powerful enough that this is worth checking out.
Yeah, for sure. I want to go back to it. I do want to check it out a bit more. I think the idea that it's not like a 50-hour game helps as well. Like, you're like, okay, yeah, you can probably do the main story in about 20 or so.
Yeah.
Which is good. I think
I was actually very ready to finish the game when I got to that point.
Okay,
I wasn't craving this kind of, I need to go and collect every fish. And there will be some people who definitely will want to do that and make every single meal. But I was like, hey, I've seen what I want to see, and I loved it for that.
Awesome. Very, very cool. Well, yeah, we'll hope that comes to Switch in the future, but sounds like it's something that people should be keeping an eye out for and checking out if they can. We are going to take a break, having talked about every video game, apparently, and we'll come back after that with some of your emails, so don't go anywhere. We will be right back.
Hello everyone, and welcome back to the second and final segment of today's show. It is time for your emails. We have a decent few to get through. We're still working through our list. We put out a big call a little while ago, and people really sent over a ton of emails and questions and comments, so hugely appreciate everyone for that. But if you would like to send in an email, please email thisnintendolife@gmail.com. That is thisnintendolife@gmail.com. Or you can leave a comment, a question in our emails thread channel, I should say, on our Discord server. There's a big old growing community over there, so check that out. Our first email this week is from Brett, who is from Minnesota in the United States. It says, hey guys, I've recently found myself getting really into rhythm games. As an adult, I'm finding it harder and harder to play open world or difficult games during the week, and have found rhythm games to be the one genre that I can pick up after a long work day to relax. My favorites right now are Sayonara Wild Hearts, not really rhythm genre, but every level is tied to a song, and Avicii Invector. I see there are other rhythm games being released for the Switch, like Rhythm Fighter and Crypt of the Necrodancer. Can you recommend some non-Guitar Hero based rhythm games, and are we going to see a Rhythm Heaven for Switch? Thanks, Brett.
Thanks, Brett. I think rhythm games are definitely something that's close to both of us in certain ways. I definitely have one of my most vivid gaming memories of all time is sitting in Bally's bedroom watching him play Guitar Hero 3 for the first time and being in awe of like, oh my god, how do your fingers move that fast? And keep in mind, he's playing medium, by the way. This is on medium difficulty, and I was like, Jesus, dude, that's crazy. And obviously then I got into Guitar Hero to the point where I taught myself guitar, and now I own like 3 different guitars and a bass and all that sort of stuff.
This was after we'd gotten quite into Donkey Konga back before.
Yeah, true. Yeah, if we want to go back to the origins of rhythm gaming with us, probably Donkey Konga.
Probably the first one.
Yeah, I think so. I'm not sure if there was anything before that, right? Like, there wasn't really N64 rhythm game you played, or like there wasn't anything on the handhelds, right? They tried to do that Guitar Hero handheld game for DS, I remember, that had the add-on that you put into the GBA
really
slot,
weird.
And like had 4 buttons on it. It was super strange.
Strum on the touch
Strum
screen.
on the touch screen, yeah, exactly. Like, what a
Yikes.
wild thing. I would love to own that one day. Absolutely would love to check out the weird Guitar Hero DS game that was a big deal. But yeah, I think we're talking about like more non-Guitar Hero stuff that Brett mentions here. And obviously we're both now very big fans of the Rhythm Heaven series, having played Megamix. And yeah, I was looking up how many Rhythm Heaven entries there have been. And so the original one actually came out on GBA. And it was only in Japan, so that one never came out here. Though I believe some of the games from it migrated over to the DS version when that was released, because that was the first kind of international release. There's also an arcade Rhythm Heaven game, which I'm not sure if that still exists in Japan, and I'm not sure if you ever came across it when you were there, Bally. But I think that because there's only been 3 of them, there's the DS, the Wii, and obviously Megamix, and the GBA one, if you want to count that. It is one of those underrepresented Nintendo series, and I would love to see it come back. But I don't know. Do you think it's going to make a return on Switch, Bally?
Probably at some point. I think most of the sort of series that we've been clamoring for will, make it onto the Switch at some point in its life cycle. Like, we've already seen like a lot of games, Advance Wars is on its way. Like, there's a lot of games that people, we haven't seen those games in a long time. Stuff like WarioWare as well. Like, I think that, everything can be successful on Switch. And for that reason, even if Rhythm Heaven isn't quite as popular in the West as it is in Japan, that doesn't mean to say it's still not going to come to the Switch in the West. And I think, there's still time in the Switch life cycle for sure where I think we could see it.
I hope so. And I think, obviously, the fact that WarioWare Gold and Rhythm Heaven Megamix came out on 3DS said to us, like, oh, Nintendo haven't forgotten about these types of games. And the fact that WarioWare has now come to Switch makes me think, ooh, I wonder if the team who worked on that are now going to work on a Rhythm Heaven. Like, does that make sense? Is that something that they're going to do? Obviously, Rhythm Heaven probably sells a lot less than WarioWare just because lack of recognition, lack of kind of brand awareness. But, that didn't stop Nintendo porting fucking Miitopia over, so anything can be possible. So I do really hope that happens, and I think that series is just really, really fucking good. So they should do something with it, especially because, like, when you think about the bases that Nintendo hits in terms of genre, rhythm games, like, that's their thing for rhythm games. There's not really any other game they have in their stable that hits that genre. So and it's a weird one, but it's one of the best, if I'm honest, when it comes down to rhythm games. So are there any, Bally, rhythm games that you have played and enjoyed that are on Switch, or that you have played in the past that you think are good games to check out?
I've honestly not played a ton, and Guitar Hero and Rock Band takes up a large number of the ones I've played. But Rhythm Thief and the Emperor's Treasure was something that we got free on 3DS as part of that like humble bundle thing, right?
Yes, you say free. I guess we did pay for all those games, but like it was very cheap, overall. Yeah.
I enjoyed that game quite a bit. I think I've played Rhythm Paradise Megamix after that, and it just completely usurped it as like the best rhythm game on that system. So it's still worth going to, though, if you are into rhythm games. Rhythm Thief, I think it was fun, and it's got like this kind of Layton style world and dialogue and kind of story that you follow along, and it's kind of cool. It's a very strange game, but I'd recommend it. And I've also tried when I was in Japan, I keep forgetting the name of it, but
Taiko no Tatsujin, the drum
exactly.
master.
I tried that with Caroline in an arcade when we were in Hiroshima, actually, and
nice.
Yeah, it was cool. We just tried it once. It was really hard and definitely felt a lot more similar to like a Donkey Konga, obviously. Yeah, that was cool. I think, you can get that here just in the Japanese store. And I believe it connects to like some plastic drum kit if you have it.
There is a drum kit. So I believe the drum kit is a Japan exclusive, I want to say. So if you want to get it with the actual drums, you might have to import that version of the game, because I don't believe, maybe in Europe they did it. I know I heard that James Jones on RFN, he got it with the drum part, and I can't remember where that came from. But yes, I believe the version on Switch, the Taiko no Tatsujin, is available with that physical version, but I believe you can play it without it with controller, and I think it's probably okay. But it's probably, if you want to get the full rhythm experience, it's like Donkey Konga, right? Like, you don't really want to play that without bongos, even though you probably could do quite easily. It just loses a bit of what the identity of the game is, and I think because that game is built around it so much, it makes sense that you'd want to go after that. So that's definitely a series I want to check out, and obviously is on Switch. Obviously you mentioned Crypt of the Necrodancer, and both of us have played Cadence of Hyrule, which I'm sure, if Brett, if you haven't checked that out, then like, yeah, of course, that's a great game to check out if you are a fan of Crypt of the Necrodancer, because it's basically the same game except with a Legend of Zelda skin, and some great fucking music from that series.
Yeah, I think I enjoyed the music more than the gameplay with that game.
I agree,
but it's worth checking out.
Especially the Gerudo theme. That's always been my favorite song from Ocarina of Time, is like the Gerudo, the Valley theme, I believe it is. And that version slaps. It is so good. There's some real good remixes. Actually, what's his name from YouTube? The guy who we watch who does guitar covers. I believe he...
Family Jewels.
Family Jewels, yes. I believe he contributed music to that soundtrack, which is awesome. It's such a cool thing that they were able to do. And it's still kind of wild to me that Nintendo went to this indie developer and were like, hey, here's one of our biggest IP, make a version of your game with it. And I was like, yeah, it's they haven't done something like that since, and we've always speculated of like what could they do with other indie developers. And you know, I guess they're doing a different thing now of like fucking Way Forward are working on Advance Wars, but they're just making a straight ahead remake of Advance Wars. They're not like making a, I don't know, dancing game with Advance Wars, right? Like it's not the same thing. But,
we mustn't forget that Ring Fit Adventure also has like a Breath of the Wild and Mario Odyssey rhythm game that I think I've heard decent things about, but it's a very random
totally
edition.
Forgot that existed.
Yeah.
So,
really,
yes.
I mean, we definitely need to get to Ring Fit Adventure for sure.
Yeah,
and I'd love to try that out when we one day get to that game.
You could argue that's almost a rhythm game, exercises rhythm in a way, right? To some degree.
The Wii Fit definitely had like rhythm style stuff to it with like the step count. There's like I don't know what you call it, but it was like an aerobic thing where you go step on, step off kind of thing, and it felt a bit Guitar Hero-ish at times. So
definitely had a bit of that vibe to it. Yeah. I don't believe these are on the Switch yet. They should put them on there. But I recently picked up the Final Fantasy Theater Rhythm game on 3DS, which is a rhythm game that has music from the entire Final Fantasy series. I think I got Curtain Call, which was the sequel, which had all the stuff from the first game, but then even more tracks as well. And I'm kind of waiting to play that until I've played more of the mainline Final Fantasy games. I definitely want to finish Final Fantasy 9, 12, and probably 8, I think, and maybe go back to 4 and stuff like that. I would like to play a few more Final Fantasy games before I play that rhythm game, just so that when I go into it, I'm like, oh, I know all these songs now, and I have like, because I think the part of the fun of that is knowing the franchise and knowing the musical history of the franchise. So like, I would like to play through the rest of the games before I go and play that. But I did pick that up cheap because it obviously we kind of don't know when the 3DS eShop is going to go away. So I'm whenever there are sales happening on 3DS, I'm trying to pick stuff up, snap it up before it disappears, because obviously physical versions of those games go for quite expensive amounts at this point in time and continue to rise in price. So I just want to be careful about those. Some good ones that are on Switch, though, that I would like to recommend. Thumper is a really good game that I enjoyed quite a lot. It is, in some ways, it is definitely a rhythm game, but is also like, man, you need to have reflexes, like razor-sharp reflexes for Thumper, because of the speed that beetle races down that highway is just ridiculous. The end of that game has sections that are just like, your eyes will be bleeding, like you'll look away from the screen and the wall will just be warping at like this light speed towards your eyes, and it's like, it will definitely fuck you up.
I'm very keen to play that in VR next year at some point. I meant to do it this year, but, everything kept coming out. Did they give that
away during the Sony PSVR 3 thing that they did?
They did. So I've got like 3 VR games that I was just given. one was like Paper Beast, Thumper, and third one was Res Infinite. So yeah,
okay, cool. Yeah, Res almost a music game in some senses as well. More a visual kind of stimulus, but yeah, that seems really cool. But yeah, Thumper is on Switch. I've heard good things about that version, and I think it's a wild time. I played it quite early in the year. I think it was last year, and it didn't make it onto my top games lists. But it would have been like number 12 or 11. Like it was really close to getting in there. Really, really enjoyed that. And yeah, definitely. Be ready before you play it, because it will just be like, oh shit, I need to be paying attention and not doing literally anything else with my brain or my eyes when I'm playing Thumper, because it's an intense experience.
You've also forgot to mention that you were a dance mat owner back in the day on your PS1, right?
Well, yes, yeah, of course. I mean, it's my sister's technically.
Okay,
this was back when she like pseudo played video games, even though she never really did. But yeah, it was the Dance Dance Revolution I have played in the past and enjoyed. I don't believe there is a Dance Dance Revolution style game on modern platforms with like dance mats that you can buy. Maybe I'm wrong about that. I think Just Dance has kind of usurped it with its kind of ease of play with the phone connection and stuff like that. Obviously Just Dance is all over the place, and I don't know if that really is what Brett is looking for here when it comes down to rhythm games. I think we're more talking about more traditional like actual console video games that are not like getting up and moving around, because we gamers, we don't move, we just sit on our asses, as Pikmin Bloom continues to tell me I'm sitting on my ass too much. I've got to get out there and walk some more. So yes, that's definitely interesting one. There are definitely some cool ones that got a bit of love early on in the Switch's life cycle. Voez, I remember being one that a lot of people were talking about. It was one of the earliest Switch games that was touchscreen exclusive. You could only play it on the touchscreen, which was a weird thing. And also Just Shapes and Beats was one of those early indie games that got a lot of play when the Switch first came out. It's one that I do want to go back to at some point and play that and see what it's like. But I think actually a weird one that I want to shout out that you can get, I think, all the games on Switch now is the Bit Trip Runner series, which I would classify almost as rhythm games, even if they are also platformers, right? They are kind of endless runner, side-scrolling platformers, but those games are built to a rhythm and a beat so that you are able to like play them alongside the music, if you know what I mean.
Yes, yeah.
So
if you learned the route, you could play it with your eyes closed based on the beat for sure.
Well, it'd probably be a bit more difficult just because of the number of different inputs. But yeah, you could probably do that. I really loved the second game. That's probably the one that I played the most. I think its official title is Bit Trip Presents Runner 2 Future Legend of Rhythm Alien, as Charles Martinet says when you get to the title screen of that game. And yeah, it makes it hard to look it up because I was like Bit Trip Runner 2 and it doesn't bring anything up. But then you realize it was called Runner 2 and it's like, why? Yeah. It's like the Fast and the Furious, just fucking changing the conventions of the naming scheme of your franchise. Really, really weird. But
and that third game just didn't quite make the same impact. It was still a very good game, but
yeah, I like Bit Trip Runner 3. I think it's good. I think 2 is the best one, so if you're going to play one, play Runner 2, that would be my recommendation. But the first game, also very cool. That one's far more like stripped back. It's more of like a pixel art game. There are bonus levels in Runner 2 that are basically what Runner 1 looks like. So it's a bit more stripped back and bare bones. But yeah, Runner 2 is a really great game that kind of crosses genre, I would say, between like rhythm and action and platforming and stuff like that. But yeah, very, very good. And yeah, I think that's pretty much it. There's loads of good rhythm games out there. For me, rhythm games are often on my backlog of like, I want to get to those. It's interesting that Brett says like they're easy ones to pick up and play, and I think that's correct. Like it is really easy to just jump into them. But I feel like when I'm playing a rhythm game, it's one of those weird cases where games like that, where there's no story and nothing going on like that, I usually like to listen to a podcast while I'm playing. But a rhythm game, you can't do that. So it's like with Rhythm Heaven especially, I was like, I do actually have to commit myself wholly to this thing and not do anything else, which is interesting. So I think maybe that contributes to why I don't pick them up as easily, is because I like multitasking, if you didn't realize, and watching stuff in the background while I do something. And you can't really do that with a rhythm game because otherwise you'll mess up and you won't be able to play it properly. But yeah, the other one is the one on 3DS that Game Freak made, that is I can't remember. It's the boy running along. Editing NBZ needs to remember and put it in. If I don't, then
I cannot remember the game you're talking about at all.
It's the one where it's a side-scrolling boy, and Game Freak made it. Anyway, I'll remember it at some point. It'll come back to me. Yeah, thanks for the email, Brett. That was cool.
Yeah, thank you, Brett. That was a good question. Our next email is from
Harmonite. Sorry, I just had to blurt it out. Harmonite is the Game Freak 3DS game. There you go.
Our next email is from Capsule J, who's from Georgia in the USA. Dear Mally and MBZ, over the past year, we've seen the launches of two very different types of hardware. On the one hand, we've got the world's most powerful and second most powerful consoles, the Xbox Series X and the PlayStation 5, pushing 4K and high frame rates. On the other, we have the Switch OLED and the Steam Deck, holding it down at 720p with 30 frames per second. In other words, platform holders are simultaneously exerting upward and downward pressure on developers. What do you think this means for the game industry as we get further into this hardware generation?
Yeah, interesting stuff going on with the old consoles at the moment. Steam Deck, interestingly enough, Capital J, says it's 720p 30 FPS. In fact, Steam Deck is kind of pushing for higher frame rates, which is one of the things that makes it interesting to me, right? Like, they put out a video the other day, or someone put up a video of Devil May Cry 5 running on that thing, and it was smooth as butter and looked really good. And it's like, man, if Nintendo were able to have this power, can you imagine what we'd be able to do with Switch hardware? But yeah, they don't like chasing that stuff generally. So yeah, it is interesting because I think the Steam Deck is almost trying to bridge the gap in a way by being this like better than a Switch, but still not powerful enough to compete with a Series X and PS5. And yeah, I do think that it's just different markets going in different directions, right? Like, I can imagine someone who owns a PS5 buying a Steam Deck because they fulfill different purposes for those people, right? You know, the as much as Nintendo likes to be like, yeah, it's a hybrid console between handheld and home play, I think most people, and probably there's some data that Nintendo has on this, but I think most people probably play the Switch in handheld and don't dock it that often. I think it's just a convenience thing. It's like, look at the first iteration they did on the hardware was the Switch Lite, which I think tells you everything you need to know. A version of the thing that doesn't even dock in the first place, right? Probably says a lot when it comes to why people are interested in that system, and why people would buy games on it, right? Like, is there really a reason, if you're a person who plays your Switch 100% of the time in docked mode, to buy, I don't know, a version of a game like Hellblade: Senua's Sacrifice, right? That's on Switch and is a good version, but what's the point in doing that if you only play on your TV and you also have another console that runs it better? There is no point. So at the end of the day, the reason that you buy Hellblade on Switch is because you can be on a plane and you can play it, right? That's the cool factor, and that's why it's interesting. So it is curious because I don't think that there's no competition going on directly, I would say. And Nintendo would always say this. Nintendo would say, we're in competition with nobody. We're on our own little island. But yeah, when it comes down to the big boy consoles and Nintendo and the Steam Deck, I think all of them are kind of, it's interesting. I think this is the first generation where every platform is going in totally different directions market-wise, despite the fact that, like, a lot of the games are shared between them. It's almost like we're back to the GameCube, PS2, and Xbox. Back then, every system had similar games, but all the systems felt exactly the fucking same. We're kind of at this place now where all the systems kind of have the same games, but they're all going in wildly different directions, which I think is super interesting.
I also think it's interesting that here we are 20 years later, and those are still the three biggest they're the three biggest
console
manufacturers,
right?
manufacturers still. I'm a little surprised that no one has gotten into that market in the same way, where there was also obviously
I don't think I am, actually, given the way that video games and like how hard they are to make, right? Like, I think there's this bullheadedness from big tech companies, from like Amazon and Google and Facebook and all these places of like, we've done all these things, we can just go in there and do it. And I think it speaks to how hard video games is as a business, that they have all bounced off.
It's really interesting that all three of them have failed very badly and in sort of the last 2-3 years on those issues. It's one of these things where power in video game consoles especially, I think PC is a different discussion, but like, I'm not really convinced your average person who buys a PS5 or a Series X really cares about like visual fidelity and power. Like
I don't know, man. I don't know. I think like that's the reason a lot of people do get into it.
But like, you think of your average person who picks up FIFA or COD, and sure, they'll think it looks nicer than perhaps their last console, but I'm not convinced that there's this massive appeal for that extra power for your average FIFA fan.
Yeah, I think things are changing a little bit in some ways, of like with Sony especially, right? Because they have these prestige games like The Last of Us and God of War. I do think a lot of those types of people are also being tempted to get consoles because of those types of experiences, right? Like, I mean, if you look at IGN's like top games of all time thing and God of War winning that, I think that speaks to a more mainstream, like slightly engaged gaming audience, right? Like you can imagine someone who owns a PlayStation and follows IGN on Twitter.
Yeah,
and
I still think that audience is a lot more engaged than your average. Like, we are talking within like a video game obsessive bubble, and I obviously think those people are very into their frame rates and resolutions, but I'm not sure your average gamer is that keen on all those things. Yeah,
it's definitely like important in terms of marketing for these companies to get people interested. Honestly, I do think it is one of the more important things is graphics, because when you think about like the surface level discussions that people have about video games who don't really understand video games, a lot of the things they talk about are like, wow, the graphics look so good on this game, right? And I think that actually is a big deal to people, even if they don't really understand the nuances and the differences of why something looks better, right? I think that's how people get interested in video games in ways that they might have not been before, right? So yeah, I definitely think that it's important factor when it comes to selling systems, but at the end of the day, for like how good games are, a lot of the best games out there don't need anything like the power of those systems to perform well or to do anything special, because they just rely on interesting game systems, right? And that's the thing that makes them popular, right? Like Stardew Valley, probably the best example of a wildly successful game that you could have put on the Super Nintendo and would have been at home there and wouldn't have had any issue running, probably. But you know what I mean.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't know. I think where do you think things are going, given this current like distinction in the platforms and everyone going in different directions, right? Like you have Nintendo leaning more into the handheld side of things and like iterative hardware and probably continuing to do the Switch line, I would imagine. You got Xbox being 100% services focused with Game Pass, probably gonna go into the streaming game very hardcore in the future. And then you have Sony, who are like, we make the biggest prestige big budget things out there, and buy our console, everything's $70, but you're getting a premium experience, quote unquote. Do you think do you see them all going off and just staying in those lanes, or do you think there's going to be some mixture and crossover and stuff like that?
They've been in those lanes for about 2 to 3 years now. I guess Sony's been quite on the prestige game train for quite a while, and Nintendo obviously have been doing all these things, focusing on handheld a bit more with the Switch since it launched in 2017. And yeah, I don't think Game Pass is slowing down in any way. So I would predict that in 3, 4, 5 years' time, we'll be in a very similar situation. I do think what you're saying about Xbox is right. They will go for the whole sort of streaming thing in a bigger way, I feel, that especially than Nintendo, obviously. But so that could be the thing that changes near the end of this hardware generation. But I think otherwise, they've picked their lanes and they're going to stay in their lanes, until they are forced from their lane, and I think that could be quite some time.
Yeah, definitely. I think that there are ways in which, maybe one company decides, oh, let's try and do something similar, but will not be as successful. And, I don't see Sony doing another handheld, for example, like as much as people want them to do that. It doesn't make sense for them.
You definitely don't think they will?
I think it doesn't make a lot of sense right now. Who knows?
I mean, I would have said the same argument about PSVR 2. And they've still gone for that in a way that I think was a bit earlier than most people were expecting. So I honestly wouldn't rule out them doing something handheld related. Maybe not in the next 2 years, but in 3, 4 years' time.
I think it's interesting if they like monitor how the Steam Deck does and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But like, interestingly enough, Shuhei Yoshida, PlayStation guy, tweeted out the other day. He was like, "Oh, I've got my Steam Deck, and here's Horizon Zero Dawn running on it." And I'm like, well, there you go, right? Like with Sony putting stuff on PC, by default, like, the Steam Deck almost becomes a handheld PlayStation, right? Like, you can then play God of War on there and Uncharted and all that stuff, and that's pretty fucking wild, man. When you think about it, it's like, man, Sony's first-party games now on a handheld that can play them properly is fascinating, and I think is definitely something that probably makes them think twice about whether they should do a handheld of their own.
Yeah.
Like, if the Steam Deck becomes popular enough and their games are selling on it, then I don't know, is that okay for them? And they just want to focus on all their efforts into one platform, which, as Nintendo have found out, probably helps quite a bit, because they're no longer splitting their development costs between a handheld platform and a console platform. It's all in one, and everything comes to it, and there's no missing out, essentially. And I think that makes a big difference.
I also think that handheld technology, all technology generally, will get cheaper in 2 to 3 years' time. And I think you will have the possibility of being able to run 4K 60 frames per second on handheld a bit more easily in, say, 3-4 years' time, where...
Especially if DLSS comes into play with NVIDIA's chips and those types of things.
Well, definitely. And you can see, you might be able to see a parity between God of War 2 running on both a handheld and PlayStation 5, and I think if that becomes an obvious avenue that people are picking up Steam Decks and, Switch is still going strong, I could genuinely see Sony just being like, yeah, well, we're going to have our own hardware for that market and try and go for it.
Yeah. I guess the part of the question we haven't really talked about is like what this means for developers. Industry exerting upwards and downwards pressures on developers, as Capital J puts it. How do you feel about...
More video game delays.
Yeah, I mean, that's just an inevitability, of course. But I think we're in a place where there are definitely, like, versions of games are being built for certain platforms and then put on other places, right? Like, I think a lot of what we see on Switch is, okay, we made this game for something else, and now we have to start stuffing it into this much less powerful piece of hardware. That's a problem, and it's hard, but there's money on the table, so we should probably do it, right? And I think it's... Obviously, there are houses out there, porting houses that are very well known for doing Switch versions of games and that type of thing. But I feel like with most developers, the ideal world is to make something that just works across all the platforms in the most easy way possible. And I think, honestly, when we're talking about upward and downward pressure, Nintendo are really the only ones holding that back, because at the end of the day, the Steam Deck just kind of takes whatever your PC version is and, like, it will just work on it, right? And, like, it will, settings-wise, it will be different because it's lower hardware, power-wise. But for the most part, I believe you can just play anything from your Steam library on a Steam Deck. And maybe there are some optimization things here and there, but it's really much more easy for developers to deal with that than it is to deal with the Switch. And I think if we're really going to, talk about this, I think for the most part, it's just Nintendo holding everybody else back, or at least getting people to make worse versions of their games. Unfortunately, I don't think the other platform holders have much of an issue with that when it comes down to it. And so I think it's really on Nintendo to make a more powerful piece of hardware that can allow those types of games to continue to exist.
Well, we've just had the Switch OLED. Are you confident that we are going to get a more powerful Switch that is not the Switch 2?
Let me put it this way. I was very close to pressing the pre-order button on a Switch OLED after I saw how good it looked. And the only thing that held me back was the feeling that there is something else coming. And also the history of Nintendo, that there's always something else coming when it comes to handhelds, right? They iterate on these things like nobody's business. There's always multiple versions of Nintendo's handheld hardware devices. And it might not be next year, but I have a feeling in my gut that there is going to be another Switch that isn't a Switch 2, that is more powerful, that is just round the corner. And I would not be able to live with myself if I had bought a Switch OLED and then next year it gets announced that a better one is coming, and I would have been like, you're a fucking idiot. Why did you do that? You were baited by the internet and the hype train, and yeah, I'm perfectly fine with my current Switch, even though the fan keeps making noises and all that stuff. Yeah. I'm okay to deal with it for at least another year. If another year passes and it becomes clear that there isn't going to be another Switch, maybe I get an OLED then, who knows? But at the moment, it doesn't make sense when I feel there's rumblings out there and that feels like something is going to happen. So, yeah, I definitely am on the camp of very possible. I would give it a 70% chance of happening, probably.
I mean, they might have every intention of doing the more powerful Switch, but just can't because of the chip shortage. And
yeah, that's what a lot of people were saying.
Yeah, that's the rumor with like even the OLED, that it was meant to be 4K and have a bit more power, but doesn't.
Yeah,
so
does not.
So
at the end of the day, all different boxes. Everyone has to, obviously, I think with PlayStation, Xbox especially, it seems like development for those is easier to do in conjunction with each other. And just given the architecture from the previous generation jumping over to this one, basically everything's a PC at this point in terms of those consoles. So obviously, I'm not a developer. I don't have to port games to systems, so I don't know how difficult it is. But from what I've heard, it sounds like definitely a lot easier than making Skyrim for the PS3, for example, where they had big fucking issues. Anything being put on the PS3 was big fucking issues if you weren't called Sony, essentially. So we're in a better place than that at the very least. So there you go.
Yeah, thank you for your email, Capsule J. It's much appreciated. And if you at home would like to send us an email, please email ThisNintendoLife@gmail.com. That is ThisNintendoLife@gmail.com. Or as I said at the top of the segment, post a comment, a question in our Discord server. We've got a channel over there specifically designed for email questions. So yeah, go on, join the community. You want to. It's
absolutely.
It's a great time.
Yeah, and that, I believe, Ali, is going to close out the show for this week. We obviously have some people to thank for supporting the show and episodes and all those super things. Those are our patrons, and if you would like to support the show and get some bonus episodes and some extra stuff, head on over to patreon.com/ThisNintendoLife, where you can get some things, and Bally is going to thank some people, including a new patron that we had join recently.
Yes, thank you to our new patron, Jarhead9555. Fantastic name. Thank you very much for your support. But thank you also to our $10 tier patrons. It's hugely appreciated. They are Zach S, Atari Alex, Thomas, Matthew, and my wife Caroline. Thank you all for your $10 tier support. And yeah, as you mentioned, MBZ, we've got an episode of bonus bits coming out tomorrow, and we're actually going to talk a little bit about the new Nintendo financials in that bonus bit. So yeah, if you want to listen to bonus bits, that's on the $2 tier, so you get a little bonus show after every episode.
Yeah, and we also recently did a Patreon survey, so thank you to everybody who took part in that, and we'll be taking a look at that and thinking about some changes that we can make for that thing. Obviously, we are going to be doing a Backlog Club next time, as we talked about at the start of the show. Thank you, everyone, of course, for voting in that, and if you're a patron, you can obviously vote in Backlog Clubs. And we had our 3 Genesis games to vote between. Shout out to Rystar, which is going to be the game that we are playing on the Sega Genesis Switch Online service. Looks cool. Definitely was the one I expected to win, given that it's kind of cuddly and fun and Nintendo-like mascot platformer. So yeah, really interested to dig into Rystar and see how that goes. The game is really, really short. All the games that we chose were like kind of 2 hours or less. So if you do want to play along, which hopefully, if you got the Nintendo expansion pack with a C, then you should have access to the Genesis Online system. And yeah, we'd love to see some participation and writing in. You can obviously be on our Discord there. We have a thread for the Backlog Club stuff, and yeah, we'll be looking for comments from people about Rystar, and we'll be chatting about it next time on the show. And yeah, as I said, because it's quite short, hopefully people are able to play through it. You got 2 weeks to do so, and that should be enough time to put a couple hours into this little game. And Bally and I will have a nice big chat about it when it comes to it. So I look forward to that. Obviously, you can find us in various places on the internet. You can find us on Twitter. I'm at LordNBZ. Where can they find you, Bally?
I'm on Twitter at Ballyman91. That's BALLYMAN91. That's also my name on Pikmin Bloom, if you want to follow me on there.
Yes, yeah. I was going to say, I was listening back to an old episode recently, and I forgot that we used to say, that's also my name on the Miiverse at the end of the episodes. R.I.P. the Miiverse. Shout out. We used to plug ourselves on the Miiverse every time on this show, which I completely forgot is what we did. So, yeah, I thought you were about to do that because you were saying it in the exact same way that you did back in the day. You can also add me on the Miiverse. So, yeah, if you do want to add us on the Miiverse,
I think that's also my name on like PlayStation and Xbox. If you want to follow me on there, so you can.
Yeah. Yeah, Bally has universal branding, which is always a good idea. Fantastic. You can also find the podcast Twitter, which is at TNL Podcast, and we post updates about when the show is up and polls and certain other things over there. So be sure to head there, and you'll get links to our YouTube channel as well and our Discord via our Twitter.
And he's been posting some selective video clips from streams on the
yes. I do like
Twitter
doing
account.
that, right? We obviously we did, and we talked about it in the first segment, our N64 stream, but had to post me beating Bally in Mario Kart. That was very important that the world saw that. So you can see that over on the Twitter feed. Obviously, you can find the show in various places. We're on Spotify, we're on Stitcher, we are all over your pod catching apps. If you search for This Nintendo Life, you should find us, and you can then subscribe and download and review us and all those good things. The more people that review us, the more people that find out the show exists and might enjoy it, and then join the community and be a part of this fun thing we have going on. So appreciate all people doing reviews and things like that out in the world. And I think that's pretty much it. I think we have got to the end here, Bally, end of the road, end of the show. Looking forward to doing one more Backlog Club next week before our Game of the Year stuff kicks into gear. It's happening. Have you started getting your list in order yet, Bally, for what you're going to be?
I have. I've just kind of like writing out a bit, but I know I've got a good 3 or 4 games to play before the end of the year that arguably all 4 of them could potentially be in that top 10 list. So
they could just throw everything off balance, you know?
It's looking messy. Like I think my number 11 game this year will be the best number 11 I've ever had on a list by some way. So, I think that this year, and we'll get there, but like it's been really consistently quite good.
Yeah, absolutely. This is the most games I've played in a single year in my life. So it's a lot of good stuff, and we will be talking about it, of course, and we hope you will join us for that. We'll get there when we get there, and we'll see you very soon. Thanks everyone for listening, and we'll talk to you next time. Bye bye, folks. The musical interlude used on today's show was the Unpacking theme from Unpacking, copyright Witchbeam 2021.